Nice afternoon. I'm very pleased to be here with you at this renovated and new institute, the Institute of Science and Technology of Austria. And I have heard a lot about it before. And when I received the invitation by the chairman, Thomas Hensinger, I was very pleased to come. And I would like to thank you, especially the public, that you take the time to listen to me, because I know that you have also other things to do. So I appreciate a lot your time that you're spending with me. I'm very delighted, as I said. One of the reasons is because Austria is my home country. That's where I received all the education. And I therefore always kept a close relationship to the academic world here in Austria. And I also think it's important to have the opportunity not only to talk to the academic world, but also to talk a lot to students and doctorates, because, I mean, they are the ones who are going to prepare the future for our country and also for, of course, for our companies. My first message to you is that the food and beverage industry, which is certainly not considered to be a high technology industry today, I will put forward that I think it's going to become one of the highest technologies industries in the future. And talk about that. And I think a lot of this has to do by a revolution which is happening, and a revolution that will offer opportunities for exciting careers for scientists, not only for technologists and engineers, as it has been up to now. I think it's an industry that was being driven by technological development and by engineers, of course. I think the future is going to be very exciting for scientists of molecular biology, genetics, computer science. All what you are doing here so well is decisive for the way how we are going to be able to feed up to 9 or 10 billions of people in the future. So I will try to illustrate how academia and entrepreneurs, how academia and industry can best interface and hopefully partner with each other in the future. And a lot of this will come, of course, from my experience, as I was mentioned, almost 50 years in the industries that I have spent. So it's now 17 years ago, it was in the year 2000, that I had a vision for my company, which has at that point of time been the most successful and the most global food and beverage company. And I talked to my board and I decided that the future of our company could only be seen if we transform it from a food and beverage company to a nutrition, health and wellness company. And that was quite a shock for the board because they understood from the beginning that this would mean that we would have to change fundamentally the knowledge base that we have. And why did I do this? The reason is very simple. If you look back over the last 200 years, you will see that the main task of the food and beverage industry was to deliver sufficient calories to the population. Life expectancy in the year 1800 in Europe was 30 years. And from then onwards, thanks to the food industry, we were able to give a higher caloric coverage to most of the people in the world. And this has brought with itself that the life expectancy increased exactly proportionally to the increased caloric coverage over the next 200 years to get to a life expectancy of 78, 80 years that we have today. This is an outstanding performance. The problem was that about 1995, around, because it's, this paradigm suddenly broke. More calories did not mean anymore an increase in life expectancies. more calories meant a decrease in life expectancies. More calories meant the increase of chronic diseases. And that was the main reason why I approached my board and said, look, we have to change the paradigm. It's not anymore about the quantity of calories that the industry can deliver to the consumers. It's now the quality of calories. And quality of calories is what I call nutrition. So that was the reason. Now, when we started this journey, my goal was to provide everyone in the world products that would increase the quality of life. That's what I was looking forward. Further increase the quality of life. We had extended the life, clearly from 30 to 80 years, but now we had to increase the quality of life. And we are a company that is basically offering the consumers products from the moment before you are born, when you are conceived, up to the last part of your life. And therefore, when you need sometimes even medical support. And therefore, nutrition became so important because nutrition can contribute to a better start in life, and it can help each of us to remain healthier throughout our personal journey. And this is the reason why we moved to this slogan of start healthy in order to stay healthy. And to achieve this, we understood that our scientists had to change and to learn in order to better understand our global nutritional needs that we have, which are quite different, by the way, for the different parts of the world. I mean, the demands in Africa are not the same one the demands we have in the US or we have in Japan. But they also had to identify unmet nutritional needs and to open the door to what I believe will become the end of this development, which is going to be a personalized nutrition. So, as part of the journey, Nestlé businesses have committed to provide to the people that trust our products not only healthier but also tasty products, because this is very important. It's relatively easy to produce very healthy products, but they don't taste good. And consumers are not willing to consume those products if the taste is not right. So in summary, as shown in the chart, basically we believe that nutrition has to bring pleasure on the one side and improve quality of life. It has to help to maintain the health, and this also help, and this is quite new, to delay the onset of certain diseases. That's quite an additional dimension. So it's all about leveraging nutrition for a preventive health care. And there we are getting into completely new territory, healthcare, for example. And there's another dimension that may be more complex, but I think even more promising. And this is to combine specific therapeutic interventions with personalized nutrition solutions. It is proven that if we take medical research and we combine it during the research phase with a good preventive nutrition, we can first of all limit the dose of sometimes very aggressive medicines, and secondly, we definitely can help you to diminish the impact of the very disagreeable side effects. So I think this combinatorial strategy is going to have a major impact in the health status of the population. At least this is my view of the future of where we should go and what we can do. Now, in order to do that, of course, we had to completely reconsider our R&D setup, because we didn't have all this know-how. We never had invested into life sciences before. So let me just give you a short outlook on how we are today organized in order to live up to this claim which I mentioned before. Nestlé has about 40 R&D centers around the world. And in order to simplify them, basically each of these groups has a specific role in the value chain that goes from fundamental discovery, discovery centers, to the development of new product development centers, and then the deployment into our markets, into our factories. I'm told that the difference between good and excellent science is basically in discipline. At least that's what we believe. The difference in the outcome is if you have a disciplined approach. And that's exactly what we did when we developed these three areas. We wanted that every part of our research center knows exactly what is expected. The Nestlé Research Center is our largest unit and the reference for all our classic food and beverage and nutrition businesses. This is a mothership, I would say. To expand these capabilities, we also learned very soon that whereas in the years, I would say up to, let's say, up to 1990, 1995, we did all the research and development internally, we learned very fast that we wanted to go into life sciences. This was not possible. There is no way that a company alone can achieve all the knowledge which is necessary and all the research. And that is the reason why we immediately started to have research hubs with strong collaborations with universities all over the world. The first one was Imperial College, Cambridge, and then Singapore, and today there's a big range of universities with which we work. The other thing was necessary was, as I mentioned before, we were a technology-driven company, so if we wanted to become a nutrition health company, we had to create a health science institute, and that's what we did. This Health Science Institute was created 7 years ago. It is located in a campus very similar to what you have here. It's the EPFL in Lausanne, and it benefits from this academic environment in order to attract talented students and apply the most advanced genetic and molecular tools to better understand this complex relationship between nutrition and health. It has, by the way, a very successful PhD program in collaboration with the EPFL and the University of Lausanne and Geneva. So those are two of the discovery centers. The third discovery center is a systems technology center, which is responsible for one of those breakthrough technologies that we have developed, for example, for Nespresso, Dolce Gusto, which are more systems breakthroughs. So that's discovery. Development, for the development, we have 11 large technology centers, one for each of the business categories that we are. And they are responsible really to develop the technology part of it, how to produce those products, and then afterwards that this knowledge goes straight into our factories. This is the area, I would say, which is a playground for our engineers, mainly. And then finally, we have in the different markets or countries, like we mentioned them, we have technologists who are responsible for the innovation of the products, using the know-how from the technology center for technology and the know-how from the discovery center from the science side. So an efficient R&D organization is necessary, but it's not sufficient. It's just a sine qua non. You need to be flexible. I think if there's anything I learned today about the IST, it's flexibility that you have and excellence. Those two things which are absolutely important. You have to bring in bright people which have not only excellence, I would say, in their know-how, but also hopefully they have some crazy ideas. And you also need then afterwards a manager who protect those people, because an organization is always in danger that bureaucracy kills the craziness and the inventiveness of the scientists. So it's very important that when you lay out such an organization, you take into account all of these things. What you see here is on the gray horizontal bars, you see the discovery centers, which I already have mentioned, which make the fundamental discoveries, which then will be shared over with the development centers. And they are the part which have the most relationships with academia on a worldwide thing. The blue vertical columns represent the development centers. As I mentioned, they are aligned with the businesses upstream, and they are aligned with the factories downstream. And this is where we have most of our industrial partnerships with our suppliers. This is where we work together with them. And then, on top of this matrix, we have what we call disruptive innovation initiatives. I'm absolutely convinced that any research center must have a 10 to 15% budget, which should be freely available to the scientists, so that they can really go into high risk and perhaps not always, of course, successful projects. But I think it's absolutely necessary. We also believe in excellence, like you believe so much in excellence at this institute. And this is the reason why we are awarding internally the title of Nestlé Fellow that recognizes scientific expertise above and beyond what is expected as a management skill. And they are usually the drivers of crazy projects that we have, projects which are absolutely new and which are disruptive and which are very much important to have those people also. Now, this organization is ideally suited, as I mentioned, and it was conceived as this, with the outside partners. Open innovation with academia, industrial partners, suppliers, but also more and more venture capitalists is an essential part of our daily life in our research environment. Our 6 main academic partners and all our major 23 innovation partners have all agreed to co-invest with us in joint projects to share the risk, but also to share the returns. And that is a very important strategic decision. And as you know from your own experience, this is the part you have to clarify before you go into really a partnership. I mean, how much is being financed by whom? And then afterwards, if by any chance you have a good result, how you're going to share afterwards the economic profit that this new idea might bring. This is something quite a difficult discussion, especially when you talked about university. I must say, normally it's easier when you're talking about strategic partners, suppliers, or even, I would say, institutes. Normally, there's more flexibility to do that if you are talking purely on the university side. In addition to these partnerships years ago, and we were, I think, the first one in our industry, we also started internal venture capital activities. I created a venture capital fund, which was about 600 million of Swiss francs at the time. And the idea was that this venture capital fund looks into the periphery of what our research and development people were doing, not at the core. Look out into the periphery, which were going into areas which we would, and our research people would never look into. And this turned out to be a very, very important additional source of information. We have created and participated in venture capital companies, startups, and several of those projects have become very successful commercial companies already. I think one area that becomes clear to me is that scientific excellence is more and more global. And I think also, again, when I look here, 60 nationalities at the IST, almost 80% are foreigners. I think this is a good reflection of what I'm saying here. As you can see in this chart, the top 4 countries that are most innovative are the United States on the one side, which is, and Switzerland is today in position number 4. But if you look carefully, you see that today the position number 2 and 3 are in Asia. And they are basically in Hong Kong and in Singapore. And I think, I mentioned it this afternoon a little bit, we have to realize that Europe and even Israel have been losing part and position over the last couple of years. I think it is really the Asian part which has recovered a very strong position. And I think it is therefore so important that an institute like the IST becomes extremely successful. It's a different approach because it's not the university approach. It is a different approach. And I believe and I rely that institutions like yours are able to blend this scientific excellence, but to blend it also with entrepreneurship. I think it will be very important, the next step that your institute is going, that we get this mixture between, this blending between scientific excellence, but also, also excellence entrepreneurship in order to maintain the competitiveness of Europe. Otherwise, I would say the old model that we had in the past was really declining more and more. I think it is a challenge that I like to share with all governments and academic decision makers, especially in my interventions in Davos, when I have the opportunity to meet the university and academic people from all over the world, but also the governments. And I was, at the time, advisor to our Chancellor Schüssel, when we already talked about this challenge. And I must say I'm very proud that the Chancellor at that time understood that, and that he created an institute like the IST as a response to the situation that we had in Europe at that time. So I'm very thankful to him, first of all, but I'm also very much encouraged, and one of the reasons why I wanted to share with you some hours here at this institute. From our side, of course, we cannot just sit and wait until the Asian are overtaking us, and that was the reason why we have established 2 major hubs, research hubs, one in Beijing, where we have 2 research centers, and one in Singapore. So with this, I hope to have given you a fair picture of how we are organized and what we are looking for and why we did what we did. And now I would like to move on, perhaps, to some of the major challenges which I see in front of us. As we all know, we not only are getting more people in order to feed more people, but as we grow to over 9 billion of people in the next coming years, the nutrition needs worldwide will become so complex that not any single actor will be able to address them alone. So I'm absolutely convinced that we have to combine even more so the efforts of governments, NGOs, academia, industries, and first and foremost of the people that need to measure in a transparent way how difficult it will be to feed everyone in the best possible way, which I think, and I said again, which is going to be personalized. And I want to take you through 4 of these challenges that you see on the chart here. The first one is aging of the population, without any doubt. I mean, this is a major, major issue. The second one is still undernutrition, which, of course, in Europe and the United States is not on top of our attention. But overnutrition is on top of our attention, which is not on top of the attention still in Africa and some Asian countries. So it's quite interesting. We have undernutrition on the one hand, overnutrition on the other side. And then we have a rising concern of nutrition-associated allergies and disorders. So let me go through those 4 only. I mean, I could be talking about some others, but I thought those were the ones I wanted to spend a little bit of time. So by 2050, we estimate that there will be more than 2 billion people aged more than 60 years. And we know very well, I think this is everybody, that the elderly have a different energy and nutritional need. And we have to understand now, all together, how nutrition can contribute for a better aging. We're already old, we know that. But there's still the aging process. If you look how much a person costs to the health system, we are spending about, in the last 3 months of our life, that's where we are spending most of the money. We have to find a solution to this. We have to get to a better aging, to a healthy aging. And better quality of life for the individuals themselves will also put then, as I said, less financial pressure on the social security systems around the world, which are not sustainable the way they are today. The United States is already spending 17% of the PIB is going spent on the so-called health system. Reality, there is no health system. There's only a sickness system. There is no health minister. There's only a sickness minister. Also in our case. When do you really get into contact with the health system? When you are sick. And the reality is, I believe very clearly, this is not sustainable. I think we will have to spend much more time, money, and effort in order to prevent people from getting sick. That's the only way how this health system can work. And when you ask an older person about his or her priorities all over the world, there's always the same answer. What would you want when you're an older person? It's autonomy. That's what we all are really worried about, the loss of autonomy. And this has to do the loss of mental autonomy, and Alzheimer is perhaps the best expression of that, of course, but it's also the physical autonomy, that you cannot walk anymore, that you are dependent. The dependency is the worst thing that we all fear when we are getting old. And this is why we have a major effort to address the maintenance of cognitive capability in the elderly. And let me just share with you this digital simulation of actual neutrons is a beautiful example of the collaboration that we have with the Federal Institute of Technology in Lausanne. I'm sure some of you, or most of you, know Professor Henry Makram, who has launched a project which he calls the Blue Brain Project. Now I think it has become the Human Brain Project, funded by the European Community. And he has embarked into an attempt to stimulate part of the human brains. So the yellow wave, which you see on the screen, indicates the energy needs of a column of neurons in our brains during the cognitive processing. This is this one that we just saw here. And what our scientists are working now together with him is to understand better what are the specific needs, nutritional needs, that may help the brain to better maintain its energy balance and therefore to improve the cognitive capabilities in the elderly. And we have already been able to launch a first product in the United States, approved by the FDA, which is a product preventive for Alzheimer. It's not a cure. I don't think nutrition can cure. Nutrition will never be a medicine. But what it can help preventing. So we have been able to launch a product already. We have a very large clinical trial ongoing in collaboration with the University of Toulouse in France, where we are also testing a new plant, a proprietary plant of macro and micronutrients in the people above 70 years old. And as we also have a pet business, we have been launching, and we had launched about 5 years ago, a special anti-Alzheimer product for animals. Now, the first time I was still in charge of the company, when I announced this in a press conference, there was a big smile. I said, well, you know, you will realize the day you come home and your dog don't recognize you anymore, that perhaps this is a major issue. It is also for the animals a major issue. So what I want to say is that, yes, we are now in a position to tackle those problems in a preventive manner. thanks to the collaboration that we have with Dr. Markham. Now, I move now to another tragedy of the world, which is a tragedy of undernutrition, which still exists. Now, there are many issues. I mean, you have, for example, the vitamin E issue, especially in Asia, for example, where we still have hundreds of thousands of children going blind because they don't have sufficient vitamin E. But I took another one. I took the inadequate nutrition of mothers and children, which is responsible for the deaths of up to 5 million of people every year. So what we were doing on a big mass was that we are now fortifying almost all of our products. Last year we sold more than 200 billion fortified products to consumers all over the world. And those are mainly iron and zinc, and let me say these are at no additional cost for the consumers. But today I would like to share with you one of the most striking examples of how this can contribute to enhanced quality of life, what I said was our objective. On the vertical axis of this, did I jump one? Yes, here we are, sorry. On the vertical axis of this graph, you see the amount of hemoglobin and an indication for the iron in the blood of babies. And on the horizontal axis, you have the ages in months. Now, what we know very clearly is that the brain of a baby has a critical period during the first 2 years of life when the precise amounts of iron are needed to reach the maximum brain development. And a deficit during this window of the first 2 years cannot be compensated with iron supplements later on in life. Either you get it there, you don't get it. It's a little bit like calcium. Either you get it before 14 years or forget it afterwards. I mean, most calcium supplements for ladies of 70s are useless. The texture of your bones is decided early on. Similarly, the capability of your brain is decided during the first 2 years. And what you see here is a red line are shown babies that do not have access to fortified processed food, and the blue line shows you the babies that have access to supplemented foods, and you can see that they are much better well protected. In some countries, we are the only company that provides fortified baby food by now. We have been able to measure this with independent experts that these products decrease the risk to develop anemia by about 50%. And we were able to estimate that the improved cognitive abilities in the population would increase by about 17%. Now, in developing countries, this is an enormous impact, and this is the reason why many of governments have now been embarking in fortifying baby foods. One of my favorite examples of academic collaboration is together with the universities of Southampton, Singapore, and Auckland, which is a so-called EpiGen consortium. We have started a major study to fight against gestational diabetes in women. We know this is fairly common risk during pregnancy, and in most cases, mother recover naturally. However, what was not known up to now is that babies that have been exposed in utero to high levels of blood sugars have an increased risk to develop metabolic disorders later in life. We knew about the mothers, but we had no idea about the impact that this gestational diabetes had on the fetus. And this seems to be regulated by the epigenetic modifications of the DNA in the chromosomes of the babies. So with our partners, with the EpiGen Consortium, we have initiated the clinical trials that has recruited 1,000 800 women that wanted to be pregnant. And we now follow up to now 600 pregnancy where we provide proprietary nutritional supplements to help regulate the glucose levels for them. As I mentioned before, perhaps interesting, the cost of this is about 50 million only of this trial, and they are paid 50 and 50% by Nestlé, and the other 50% comes by governments of the 3 universities. So this is one of this discussion we had about who pays and who gets what. Let me move on to another major challenge of our society, and the one that I think is mostly being discussed in media here in Europe, and this is the other side, the problem of excessive nutrition, and in particular of sugar intake, which potentially leads to insulin resistance and morbid obesity, the whole question about obesity. It's now considered a pandemic worldwide, and it is equally, by the way, in developing countries as well as in developed countries. It's something completely new, growing very, very fast. We are facing the staggering situation that on the one hand we have almost 1 billion of people starving to death, and on the other hand we have about 1/3 of the population that will soon be obese with all the underlying medical conditions that this would imply, not again to speak about the social cost and the health cost that this has. And I wanted from the beginning to be Nestlé not part of the problem, but to be part of the solution. And I know we still have a long way to go in this area. But at least over the last 15 years, since we have decided to become a nutrition, health, and wellness company, we have decreased by more than 30% the amount of sugar and salt in all of our products. And we have done this gradually because, again, what we have learned is if you do it from one day to the other, your consumer just will not consume your product. You have to accustom, and if you would try to have a Maggi soup today, for example, and you compare it to the one we had 15 years ago, you would not be able anymore to eat the one 15 years ago because it would be so salty. So we have been educating the consumer to accept that and to get accustomed. In addition to this gradual effort, we recently published one of our, I would say, most disruptive, perhaps, innovation project that was addressing the following question, which is, of course, a critical one. And this is, can we provide the same sensory perception with less sugar and without any natural or artificial sweetener? That was a question that we had. I mean, we know that we have sweeteners, aspartame, we know we have stevia, which is a natural sweetener, which is being used by the beverage industry. But is there a possibility to have sugar with less sugar? That was a question that we asked our scientists. And the result is what has been called now the Nestlé sugar. Now, just let's have a look. You see on the left-hand side the normal sugar, the way we use it, and let's try to dilute it. You see here in the charts, we're putting some water in it, and what you see is the water dilutes it, but the crystals, the big part of the sugar is still there, and that's exactly what happens in your mouth. Okay, you take the sugar into your mouth, you dilute the outer part, but then you swallow the whole core of the sugar. That's how you get this huge sugar intake, okay? Now we developed a new sugar, which is sugar, but what we did, basically, we took out the core of the sugar, and we left only the surface one, okay? So what you get is now this. You put water on it, the sugar is dissolved, and basically you're swallowing only the water. And we are more or less diminishing between 40 to 50% of the sugar intake, but in your mouth, the feeling, the organoleptical feeling, is like you would have normal sugar. So this is, I would say, a beautiful example of material science applied to food. Let me move on and give you the last example that will cover what I call nutrition-associated disorders, by which I mean diseases that somehow can be caused by inappropriate nutrition or diseases that can be considerably alleviated by the right nutrition. Then my fourth example. And once again, the numbers are stunning, since 1 in every 4 individuals may suffer from such conditions. I mentioned before, 7 years ago, we have created the Nestlé Health Science Institute exactly to tackle those challenges and opportunities. And to build a new company in less than 10 years, a strategy of open innovation, as I mentioned before, is absolutely necessary and essential. Therefore, as you can see in the chart, this company acquired a lot of other companies also, because acquisition is one way in order to get the input and the feedback. One of them was Vitaflo, that we have acquired early on, and which has developed foods that can address difficult conditions, including metabolic genetic disorders. And they have all discovered the specific fats, which we call, you know better under the medium chain triglycerides, can improve a very serious medical condition, which is called refractory epilepsy. And Charlie, that you can see on the slide, is a young English boy that suffers exactly from refractory epilepsy, meaning that he does not respond to standard medication. So he, unfortunately, can have up to 20 seizures per every day. And this means that for him, going to school or playing with friends or doing sports or just having a normal life, whatever normal means in such a system, is virtually impossible for Charlie. So have a look at a short video that will show you what I think the future, part of the future of nutrition can do in such a case.
This is Charlie. He's from Epsom and he's got epilepsy. Every day he has between 10 and 20 seizures.
15 minutes after arriving, Charlie has a drop attack, which his parents worry is affecting his development. Despite being on anti-epileptic drugs, Charlie still has up to 20 seizures each day that cause him to fall, so has to wear a protective helmet.
Wow. What we'd like to try is something called the ketogenic diet. Now what this does is mimic starvation. It's really important this kind of thing is done under supervision by a trained professional dietitian and paediatrician.
The ketogenic diet is very high in fat, sometimes up to 90%. Carbs are almost out of the question, and there are restricted amounts of protein.
He hasn't had a seizure since the 2nd of August now.
Goodness, so that's like nearly 2 months.
The fact that he's coming back to the Charlie we used to know, so it's just brilliant. Where are you going with that ball?
As with Charlie, the diet has revolutionised the lives of many families. Approximately half of all children with difficult-to-control epilepsy have significant seizure reduction when treated with the diet.
This is a clear example of established scientific food as medicine.
So this is, I think, one example of how good nutrition can change the life of a child in a very, very substantial manner. And basically what we have been doing, we have been developing products that are fully compliant with the ketogenic diet, but they also give him all the rest which he needs, which is carbohydrate and proteins, which are very important for him. And in his case, from 20 seizures per day, he is now down to about 4 to 5 per year. You can imagine how this has changed the life of him and his family. As I said, this is perhaps one of my favorite slides because it really shows the journey from the food and beverage company to a nutrition, health, and wellness company. As I mentioned, the ketogenic diets were known for 100 years. And then we have introduced the food therapies to modify the diet and to improve the disease outcome and the overall quality of life. But I have no doubt that this is not the end. This is just the next step. And I'm sure that the molecular biology tools which we're developing just now at the Institute will provide the next generation of nutrition solutions for an even better outcome. So I think this is just one simple example, but there are so many of those examples of sicknesses which are related to nutrition and where we can have a major impact. So many years at the head of a fast-moving consumer goods company have taught me that it is impossible to predict all the trends that will come into the future. The millennials, for example, the generation that some of you in this room confirms what I just saying by now. I think our relationship with food has evolved over the centuries. And you can see there, I mean, the task of the food industry in the beginning was just to assure sufficient food supply. Then afterwards we aggregated safety aspects and became the pleasure aspect. And I think the new one, the future of this is, as I said, to assure nutrition, health, and wellness. The new generation, which is very interesting, they have a different relationship to food already now. They talk about it, they take pictures. If you go to the apps on a telephone, and you look on food, the amount of applications there are more than 1 million applications which are all only working on food. They share to each other what they are eating, how they are cooking, and they wonder quite a lot whether these products are sustainably produced. So basically, they want to do everything about their food. And this generates, on the other hand, an enormous wealth of accurate, sometimes also inaccurate data. So that will be the next big challenge. This is need for information that this new generation has. And there are many new technologies are coming up, connecting people between themselves, but they are connecting also the people to the devices that they have very clearly, and appliances between themselves. So we have several priority partnerships with software, hardware, appliance companies, which are based on portable smartphones, which are connected to health sensors, but they're also connected to fridges, to cooking devices. And I think we anticipate at least that soon orders will be placed directly by your phone. You will not only place them, because they know your health status, your agenda of the last and following days or weeks, and what your energy needs will be. And also they will know what is left in your fridge. All of this today is already a reality. Let me perhaps show you a little bit to come to an end how this will look into the future.
Today, we live in a world of hyper-relevance, where every step, calorie, and activity gets measured and evaluated. There's no shortage of devices, apps, or companies to help us capture and analyze a growing amount of data around every aspect of our health and lifestyle. Yet, armed with more technology than ever, it's never been harder to be healthy. Logging what we eat and drink is still cumbersome. Wading through the growing technology choices and information is overwhelming. And getting a true picture of our overall health is next to impossible. That's why Nestlé and Samsung came together to create the Nourish Project, a personalized, holistic health platform. The Nourish Project combines decades of proven scientific research and innovative algorithms created by Nestlé, with Samsung's cutting-edge technology to provide a simple and easy way to manage your health. What makes the Nourish Project different is how seamlessly it integrates into your life, offering you simple and timely advice while connecting automatically to all your devices. It will provide you with a single score that takes into account your nutrition, lifestyle, and activity, while giving you a clear picture of your overall health. Backed by decades of research, the Nourish Project helps you manage everything, from your nutrition to your fitness, while empowering you to easily manage your overall health. It makes capturing what you eat simple and easy.
I had an apple and a glass of milk in the morning, and a hot dog for lunch.
It learns from you, giving you increasingly personalized advice. It nudges you when you need encouragement. It helps you manage stress. It makes sure you get enough sleep. It can even order dinner, helping you make smart choices wherever you happen to be. In the future, the Nourish Project will integrate into all devices, whether in your home, outside, or on the move. It can also connect to a broad ecosystem of care providers while becoming the world's largest integrated device network and a platform for lean clinical trials. It will be able to tell users when to hydrate and the best times to eat. At the Nourish Project, we developed a program to integrate seamlessly into your life, simplify your health, and empower you to live a smarter, healthier, and happier life. The Nourish Project, making healthy living easy.
Well, as I said, this is not tomorrow. This is already happening. We have this project in Japan, fully applicated already, and thousands of consumers are using it. So what you need in order to make this thing a reality are basically three things. First of all, clearly better products, more nutritional products. That's the first thing, big challenge for us. Secondly, the technology interface has to be more user-friendly. We know very well that part of some geeks, the rest, wants to have simple things that they can connect, so it has to be user-friendly. And the third one is you need well-educated people. So education will be a key enabler to empower the people in the future. And therefore, a project that is very close to my heart is the launch of the very first massive online open course for children and teachers and families for nutrition. That's what we launched recently, and it has been also a very, very big success. Indeed, I'm passionate about genetics and molecular biology, but I think sometimes it is even before necessary that we have a better understanding of the basic nutrition. And I think basic nutrition should be absolutely mandatory course for any doctor in this world who has, most of them has no idea, couldn't care about nutrition. I don't know how a doctor can exercise today if he doesn't understand the impact that nutrition has on the health of his patients. But also, I would say it should be mandatory at schools. So, ladies and gentlemen, I'm coming to the end of my presentation. I hope that I have convinced you that the journey from the food and beverage to nutrition, health, and wellness is a worthwhile one. At least my board accepted after 2 years of discussion with it that this was the future that we were going to go, and that it is something which is important for all people in the world that trust our products and our company. Trust is extremely important. It was almost 10 years ago that in Davos I developed a new, I would say, approach for the corporate social responsibility of a company, which I then developed further on with Porter and Kramer, which we defined creating shared value as a way to lead the large corporations to succeed. And basically what he said, a large corporation cannot be responsible only to create value for its shareholders. It has to create value for the society in which it works. And this has to go hand in hand. This has to be one strategy. What matters is that creating shared value is a natural outcome of being, on the one hand, compliant, but of caring about future generations and caring about the people that depend on us. And at a company like Nestlé, I mean, with more than 340,000 direct employees, with more than 2 million of indirectly working people for us, there is no doubt that we have a huge additional responsibility. We will not be able to meet our own expectation if we do not add generating trust as the ultimate goal of our company. It is not only our responsibility because it is the right thing to do, but also because it will improve competitiveness. I think today young generation wants to work for a company that has a social responsibility, that has a vision into the future, that goes far above the next quarter of financial results, without any doubt. So, ladies and gentlemen, this was one journey to nutrition, health, and wellness. Maybe I should say this is my own journey to nutrition, health, and wellness. And I hope that some of you and some of the millennials and maybe some older and some younger current and future scientists will join me on this journey. I think it's an important one. I personally believe that's a way how we will be able not only to feed up to 10 billion of people, but to give them a much better life. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much for taking us on this journey and introducing the stages of this journey. I can imagine that there are a couple of questions. Therefore, we are going to have a Q&A session. Yes, let's start with the lady here in the third. Hang on, we do have microphones and... No, believe me, use the microphone.
Hello? Yes, thank you.
Yes.
I wanted to start with the latest slide you showed, adding value to the society, for the society. As we know, top management is driven by KPIs and is following only those. What are the KPIs that Nestlé is applying to segregate the return on equity from social responsibility and to focus on that?
Yeah, I think that's a very, very relevant question. Because I'm also convinced what you cannot measure, you cannot manage. So measurement was a very important part when we discussed with Board and Kramer about this thing. And what we do is we have now in our yearly report, we have on the one hand financial results, which are audited, and we have on the other side the social results, which are also audited by the same KPMG company. So there you can see in an absolutely transparent manner that, for example, we have improved, I think the last figure was 87% of all Nestlé products today corresponds to a nutritional sound product. We have still about 14% where we are not yet there where we want to be. Okay? This is absolutely transparent. Every year you can see how many products have been reformulated, how much sugar has been taken out, about 240,000 tons of sugar, about 40,000 tons of salt. This is all transparent. The next thing you see there is, for example, the aspect of environmental impact. How many plastic, how many packaging have been diminishing, how many of our products, of our packaging products are recycled. So it goes on. It's a long list. We have 40 objectives which are published in advance, like we are publishing any other financial objective, and then afterwards we are reporting absolutely transparently against those objectives, both financial and the social impact that we have. And you can, this is open, you can go on the internet, you can see it and judge us on there. And you see it year after year. So it's absolutely open and transparent.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Oh, yeah.
Thanks.
That's fine.
You've been showing this diagram on iron fortification, right? And you've been comparing children that are raised using iron-fortified processed foods to children that are raised using non-iron fortified processed foods. Wouldn't it be more honest to compare to children that are raised with non-processed foods?
I don't have the chart. Now this chart, by the way, is not a Nestlé chart. If you look carefully, it was not a Nestlé chart, it was a chart from an independent thing. The issue is, there is no doubt that breastfeeding is the best solution, but there is also no doubt that breastfeeding up to 6 months is the best solution. And then from then onwards, you have to have fortified food for a baby if you want to take advantage of its food. So if the solution to have 24 months exclusively breastfeeding is not the best solution. The first 6 months is the best solution, but not 24 months. That's quite clear.
Okay. Further questions? Over there.
So what is the strategy or the opinion of Nestlé regarding genetically modified plants for food production?
My personal opinion, which is that genetically modified organisms are no danger to our health. This has been proven now for more than 35 years. There has not been one single case up to now that has shown that there was a negative medical impact or even death, forget about it, by somebody because he has been eating GMO. Just put this one, so it is absolutely, there is no health danger on GMO. On the other hand, every year in Germany alone, between 60 to 70 people are dying from organic food. Okay, because you have one problem with organic food, you have to clean it very, very carefully afterwards because it's full of bacteria, and we know very well that food contamination is very dangerous. So if you look at this from a scientific point of view, I mean, GMO is much healthier than any organic food that there is, okay, and the risk profile is much less. That's the fact. Now, the emotion and the political issue, that's a completely different story, okay? And it's very interesting, if you go backwards, when this whole thing happened in Europe, Tony Blair wanted to allow GMO products in the UK. That would have been really the door opener for GMO in Europe. And there was a scientist in Edinburgh, and he was feeding a genetically modified potato, raw potato, to mice. And the mice developed cancer. Just at the moment when politically there was a vote coming out on the thing. And the thing was, GMO produces cancer. Okay? And with this, Tony Blair was out. The fact is, it was not the GMO potato. If you give to a mice any raw potato, it will develop cancer, because raw potatoes are very toxic and are cancerous. But you see, this is how you make emotion and how you can influence the whole thing. And from then onwards, in Europe, it's over, it's finished. There's no way that you can, emotionally GMO can be accepted in Europe. I don't see it. I mean, when I was advisor to, as I mentioned before, when I was advisor to Chancellor Schüssel at the time, and he, of course, was also against GMO. And I told him at that time, I said, look, Chancellor, if you would be really convinced that GMO is dangerous for the population of Austria, you are obliged to put on every airline ticket, which goes to the United States, which goes to South Africa, which goes to China, a big sticker on top of it. You're going into a country where you're going to eat GMO products, and this is a health warning, okay? If you're really convinced. Because everybody who went with the children to Disneyland has been eating GMO and has been feeding their people GMO. So it is absolutely, if you go to the back, it's ridiculous, okay? The behavior of the people, especially in Austria, I would say, I mean, they all talk about GMO, and you have an emotional storm on you if you say something positive about it. But at the same time, the same people take the young children, go to Disney and feed them with GMO burgers and things, have no problem, okay? But here not. Interesting.
Okay, thank you. Further questions? Up there, last row.
I'm curious about the new sugar. I'm not an expert on this, but I would think that in most foods that we consume, sugar is actually in its dissolved form. So then it wouldn't really make a difference, this new sugar. So in what kind of products could you actually use that new sugar?
The first product that will come out is chocolate. Because in chocolate it works. It doesn't work, for example, in beverages for the time being. So it works in chocolates, it works in certain products, not in all of the products. But for chocolates it's very important, because you're going to get 40% less of calories. You're absolutely right. I mean, the main issue on the sugar side is that we have today moved over to fructose in most of the products for two reasons, basically for the organoleptical perception reason, but also for consistency reasons. And it's conservative, of course. I mean, when I'm being asked, how did all the sugar come into the food? I always say that, and the salt comes into the food. I always say, well, ask your grandmother, when she was trying to conserve fruit, the only way to conserve it was with sugar. That's how you make a marmalade, okay? Where you make a compote and put it in a thing. And how did we get salt into the food? This was because the only way to conserve fish was by salting it. That's how we got salt and sugar in the beginning of the industry into our products. They were the best conservation methods and the only one we had. Now, later on, of course, we moved from the normal sugar, which is a combination of fructose and glucose, to pure fructose. And that was basically the result of the boycott of the Americans against Cuba. Okay? When the Cuba crisis exploded, basically the Cuban sugar barons, they came over to the United States and they convinced the government that there should be a development effort for fructose, which the Americans could make, and were therefore independent from the sugar import from Cuba. And that was the reason why we got fructose into our food, basically, all over the world. And the difference is the way how you're digesting fructose and glucose. Okay, fructose goes straight into your bloodstream. Fructose and glucose needs your insulin part of it. And the danger of the sugar we have is mainly, and above all, the fructose, the high content of fructose that we have. So that's how sugar came. And the one we are doing, as I said, is not for beverages. It can only be chocolate is a very good one, but there are also some other products like biscuits, for example, where you can use this type of sugar.
Thank you for this very nice example of unintended consequences. Any further questions? If not, I suggest to move on outside, where some light refreshments are waiting for you, and we can continue discussions outside over a glass of some kind. So far, thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.